Welcome back, everyone, to Merge Conflict, your weekly developer podcast. I'm one of your hosts, James Montemagno, and the one, the only Frank Krueger is with me. How's it going, buddy?
I'm just an AI agent called Frank Krueger. I have been programmed to respond positively to everything you say, James, and to help you in your day-to-day activities and life. How may I assist you today?
Well, today we are recording episode 472 of Merge Conflict, and this is the one where we talk about how I built my first SaaS ever, but I didn't write any of the code.
50K in 1 week after 3 hours of programming. I cannot wait to hear how you are disrupting the software industry with AI and vibe coding. James, what other hashtags can we get into this thing?
Well, as most people know, if you listen to this podcast, I work at Microsoft. I am very close to the VS Code and the Copilot teams. I am very biased towards our tool. I say this all the time because I love our tools. I'm wearing a Microsoft shirt currently. There it is on our youtube.com/mergeconflict.fm. Like, subscribe, watch, give us the hours. I have really transformed how I work at work and how I code in small projects and big projects. And we talked about this before, but I had a mission and a journey of really trying to build something real that I would deploy. I actually went on Hanselman's podcast, when I did the original version prototype of this app, where I actually deployed it and people started using it. And I sent the link to Hanselman. I was like, I built this. And he's like, well, this is really cool. I was like, I didn't write any of the code. And he's like, shut up. He's like, he said, I don't believe you. That's what he said. He said, I don't believe you. And I was like, let me show you. So I opened up VS Code, showed him all the chats, did everything. He's like, you didn't write any code. I said, maybe 3 lines of code. And now what I've told you is I've written about 100 lines of code of this like 50 or 60,000 lines of code application, Frank Krueger. So that is where I'm at today. But I've turned it into a real SaaS, a real functioning thing that I'm almost ready to potentially take money for, which is mind-boggling.
This is so much fun because, like, I was making a little bit of fun there, just because there's so many YouTube videos out there about how you can become a millionaire just by paying $20 to Claude Anthropic every month, and then you can just make the $1 billion app and just make all this money, blah blah blah. But we're both programmers, like, we know how to do this stuff. So I love getting your perspective on how to use the tool to make your life just more efficient, because you know how to program, you know how to build a website, you could code all this stuff if you wanted to. But honestly, I'm just more jealous than anything else, because you have been so productive in the last few months, just vibe coding away, using all your fancy Microsoft tools. Everyone's worried about Cursor and Windsurf and Gemini Code and Gemini Studio and Anthropic Code, whatever the heck. And you're just hacking away at VS Code, making 5K in your first week after 3 hours of vibe coding, and I'm just jealous. So, James, should we discuss the app you're making? Like, does it even matter what app you're making? Like, all that matters is you've written an app. You're a PM. You're not supposed to be coding. You're supposed to be, like, telling people your grandiose ideas of what could possibly make money, and then just like cracking a whip over the backs of programmers and telling them, make me money. But instead you're doing that for an AI. I don't know. It's the world's weird, man.
The best PMs are the PMs that use the product as much as they possibly can. Even if you're not, if you're building developer tools, you don't have to be a developer, but you do have to understand how the thing works, and by trying it, right? So you could vibe code and not be a developer and use the tool. You're going to learn a lot about how other users use the tool. I'm a developer, so I'm going to understand how the thing is writing the code, infrastructuring the code, and how I can work better with the tool in general. The app, Frank Krueger, it is called Feedback Flow. It is a application in which you enter a URL of any social media piece of content, a YouTube video, a GitHub issue, a Reddit post, a Hacker News article, a Twitter thread, a Blue Sky thread. You paste in said URL, and it will first download all of the comments and the content from that link, and then it will analyze it. And when I say analyze, it's not just sentiment analysis. It does a full report that's customizable using GPT-4.1 Nano on the back end. It's using AI, and it was built by AI, and it will take that. Now, that is one of the features from there. Yes, the main
Can I
feature.
can I interrupt you? As a PM, you did a poor job there. The elevator pitch is much simpler than that. If you are a content producer, this is an app that critiques your content, reports on user feedback of your content, and tells you where you need to improve when you're creating your content. It's a
Yeah.
brilliant app idea, honestly. I just wanted to refine your elevator pitch there a little bit.
Yes. And I would say if you're not a content creator and you're someone that builds a product, let's say, and people are giving you feedback on your thing, the reason that this exists because David Fowler built a bunch of command line tools to gather the feedback and then put it into GPT or whatever. I built a entire app and backend for it and front end. But the idea was you see a Hacker News article or you see a Reddit thread and there's 800 articles and comments on it. There's 800 comments on it. You don't have the time to analyze
No.
that. You want to click the button and say, tell me the most important parts and like, what do I need to improve? And one of the big features I added was like, what's the product feedback? So imagine you're creating a widget, you're creating an AI coding agent. You want the feedback and you want what's the product thing, what's the truth, and here's the thing. So you give it a link, it analyzes it, gives you the product feedback. So if you're a content creator, it's going to help you improve your content. If you're a creator or someone in the space of product that's interested in what the ether of the internet is saying, it will analyze that back. So that's what it does.
And one last promotion of this thing. You didn't, I just want to reemphasize, you didn't just use an AI to build it, it uses AI. So it's one of
Yes.
those properly modern apps. It's both levels. Like you could build like a weather app and just use AI to help you write that weather app. It doesn't actually need to use AI, but yours uses AI in the back end also. Anyway, just wanted to
Yeah.
be clear.
And it's cool too. You can also just paste in anything, like any content. There's a manual mode. But one of the things that I think is really cool is like often what we do at work is like we will post a thread on Reddit. We'll create a YouTube video. We'll put it on X. We'll put it on whatever. Maybe it gets on Hacker News. So you can add like 5 URLs and say analyze. These are all in the same ether. So go analyze all of them and analyze them individually, and it'll go do that for you, which is pretty neat.
Yeah, I'm split because part of me wants to interrogate you on your what I would call the system prompts because you are using an AI to do the back end part of it, to do the analysis part. Like, are you saying compare and contrast? Are you saying analyze for SEO strengths? Are you saying analyze for user engagement? Are you saying analyze for user consumption time, which is what everyone actually wants? Um, but at the same time, I think we're here to talk about just James built an app that's SaaS and he's going to make 5K a week after
Sure.
writing no codes. Like, it's hard for me to decide even which tack to take when asking you about this thing.
Well, it went on a journey. In our Apple Note, I gave you an outline of things that you could potentially ask me. I will answer your question really quick, is that there are default system prompts, but if you go into the settings, that you can use a custom prompt and you can tell it for each data source how you would like for it to
Ooh,
analyze the content. Yes.
smart.
I know. Very smart.
No, that's yeah, actually, sorry, you stopped me there because I hadn't thought of that. Most of the AI-driven apps I've done, where the AI is actually doing the processing or whatever, however you want to think about it, I hadn't thought to actually expose the prompts to the user and let them
Yeah.
customize it.
There you go.
So that's fun. Yeah, good job.
No,
Good
the
job.
only
You've taught me
difference,
something already.
the only difference is that if you specify the prompt, I append onto the prompt no matter what, return markdown. So that's what I do because I require markdown. So from the AI. So that is the one thing that I do is I only give me markdown and that is it. So no matter what, I'm sure you could do something crazy, but yeah, that's the system prompt
Yeah.
that is there. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. There was a gentleman, a Mr. David Gentleman, who had created some softwares, and you said, as an app developer, I reject your command line interface, and I require a user interface, not
Yes.
a command interface, a user interface. And so, what was your inspiration? Was it as simple as that? Like, oh, cool, that's cool, but it'd be nicer if I actually had a UI here. Was that all that you started with, or did you have higher ambitions than
Yeah, there was a few issues that I had with David's command line interfaces. One, it was a command line interface, and
that?
the second problem with the CLI is that you needed to go set up all of your API keys. So if you're using
Right,
YouTube, using GitHub, you would need to
right.
specify these and pass these in. And the thing that David's library didn't do is it just only grabbed the data. It didn't analyze the data. And because what he would do is he would take it and then he would literally take that file that was generated, put it into ChatGPT or Copilot, and then analyze it. And I said, that is silly because you're going to be doing that over and over and over again. You want it instantaneous. I'm a GUI guy. I'm a mobile developer. I
Yep,
want it at my
yep.
fingertips. That
Good.
is a world that I live in. CLIs are beautiful, even GUI based CLIs. Like they're lovely, but I am there. What I wanted to do was understand and say, can I build something real off of this foundation? So the first thing I did is actually forked his repo and I refactored all of his code into um, shared reusable libraries that I could share with a backend or a front end, everything that I wanted to do. So my original prototype was, how do I minimize any potential cost, any potential, you know,
Yeah,
things that would be like, that would be a real app, like real, like no real databases, no real authentication. There was just a password. Just, can I create something that uses his library, but then
yeah.
challenge myself to actually use a little bit of AI? I'd never really used, besides demo, AI in real world. And every AI demo often is a chatbot. And I said, I don't want any chatbot. I want to show how easy it is to use the .NET APIs for AI
Mm-hmm.
to do something that is really highly valuable. And one of the highly valuable things, again, it's not just sentiment analysis, it's an analysis report that you're generating.
Yeah.
So that is what I wanted to be able to do in this application. And I think
Can
I
I interrupt
accomplished
you
it.
for a moment? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
wow. Okay, jumping ahead there, sir. But how many NuGet libraries are there out there? Like, how many libraries are lacking user interfaces right now? And it's
Mm,
all just because we lack the time to build the user interfaces. Let's be clear: user interfaces take a while to code. You have to understand the problem. You have to be very familiar with all the intricacies of the control system and all that. It takes a while to build a proper UI app. That's why command line apps are so, well, just out there. There's just so many of them because it's just easier to write a command line app. It's harder to build a web app that has a user interface that makes it comfortable, that makes it easy for people to enter data and to use it. So I applaud you there. Number one, I don't know why I'm brown nosing you, but um, I just think about all those NuGet libraries out there that do such fascinating things, that each one of those NuGet libraries could be an app. They're all just begging for a user interface. And so I just want to applaud you for like recognizing this is a useful thing. Let's minimize the steps here. That's what a GUI app is. It's just, let's just minimize the steps. Let's minimize the clicks. Let's minimize the data required to use it, and let's just get to the bottom line and
yeah.
output some useful data to the user. Um, so that's good. You start with that, but let's be clear. You built a SaaS thing here. You built a proper application here. You're not just like, I don't know. You're not just using his code. So let's start with David Fowler, genius programmer, write some libraries. What do you physically do, James? Do you copy all his code into a directory? You open code and you're just like, build me a UI. Is that your only
Mm.
prompt, or where do you actually begin with this thing?
Yeah, where I started was all of his code was um, inside of a console app. So he had 4 console apps, and each of them were for
Mm,
different services. So all of the code that was required was inside of it. So the first thing I did is I said, can I have um, uh, VS Code and the agent mode? At the time, I was using a lot of Claude 3.5, a little bit of 3.7, and quite a bit of GPT-4.1. Can I have it refactor all this code. So one thing I could
Mm.
do is move things around, but actually how David's CLIs were working is it was piping in a lot of variables and just making a lot of assumptions. It was a console app, right? It was just like assuming that everything was going to run a console. It wasn't made for abstractable methods, right? So it wasn't like a library that was like, give me an API key and then do this thing, right? So the first thing that I wanted to do was say, can I keep all of his CLIs working, but create a shared library that each of the CLIs were using that would then could be reused anywhere else. So the first was a refactor. So the first thing I did in my new app was I refactored all of his
Classic
code
programmer.
into one library, which was a big shared project called Shared, and it's shared code with all of the models, all the code, and all of the logic and all the things that go into it. But then that enabled me to um, then take that code and refactor it into services that looked for environment variables, that looked for passing in API keys, and then really made it
Okay.
flexible. So the first prompt that I really had in the first day that I worked on it was, can I make everything work, but make all of his code reusable? So it ended up making his
Mm.
CLIs, which I've now deleted from the repo. Sorry, David. Um, all of his CLIs ended up working. It took maybe like 2 hours of
Hmm.
coding.
Interesting.
Yeah,
It's funny because
coding.
I would normally if a junior programmer came in and I gave them a large code base, and the first thing they said is, "I want to refactor this." I'd be like, "You're fired," to be quite blunt,
Yeah.
um, because everyone wants to refactor all code until it's to their standards, whatever those ridiculous standards are. And in the end, it doesn't matter. Like if the code is functional, it does what it does. Refactoring in general, a change that makes no change is irrelevant. But you just want to get yourself into a good starting point. And if you have an AI doing it, well, you don't need to fire the AI. You can just have it do it. It'll do it. It's
Yeah.
fine. I just find that funny that like I've always been angry about junior programmers who did that, who just always wanted to refactor everything. But it's funny that that was your first step to me a
No.
little bit, to be honest.
Well, because I had this goal of, can I run all of his code in an Azure function? That was my
Hmm.
initial concept was, can I make this? My initial concept that I had was it wouldn't just be a website, but it'd be like an MCP server, maybe be a Maui application.
Hmm.
Like the whole idea was that I could create other things from it. It could still be a CLI, but maybe the CLI would even call the backend, right? Because it could handle all the idea was I hated specifying API keys. Like imagine you had a CLI that was just like, give me the YouTube videos for this thing, and it just like
Yeah.
did it, right? Because you had access to it. That was one of my concepts that I had in general. So that was sort of the next step was, all right, let's do this. So actually the next steps that I did is I refactored the code, got all the CLIs working, and then I file new project. I said, I'm going to create the
Oh.
structure that I want. I am not a fan, at least in the .NET world. I think in like the Vite world or like Vue or Angular or what, React or whatever, there's a bunch of standard like node things that you can do. And I know the .NET CLI can do stuff, but I said I want to create the infrastructure of my code, which is file new project, Blazor server app, file new project. I want to tweak the settings. I can't remember all of them by hand. I like the GUI. I'm a GUI guy.
Yeah.
So I asked it to create an Azure. I created an Azure function backend. I clicked the buttons.
Okay.
And so I actually saved keystrokes because less typing in a file new project. And then I also created the Blazor front end. So my whole concept at this point was that my Azure, my front end would call my back end. And at this point is when I started to create my custom instructions, which go into the project, and started to define my coding standards, my project structure, and a lot more that go into this. So when I'm working with AI, now it understands where I want to call things, what is going to happen, just sort of that core
Yeah.
infrastructure when it's writing code instead of it writing code in one project. It's very much different.
Yeah, and just to interrupt your thought there, that's the advantage of being a programmer coming into it. You understand the difference between front end, back end. You had a rough idea of what code you wanted executing in which domain. Whereas someone who comes into vibe coding who has no experience doing software, I don't think they have a clear distinction of the layers of software, and you can argue whether they're important or not when you're creating a greenfield application like this. But you knew, like, oh, I want this part to run on the server. This part obviously can just be client. That's just showing the data and all that kind of stuff. But you knew, I want to run this part in a Azure function or whatever domain you want to run that code in. So I think that's interesting, honestly. Just it reveals if you have zero experience with programming before, um, they just wouldn't know that distinction between those two domains. Um, I don't know where I'm going with this, other than it's important that you knew that difference and you wanted that difference, whereas someone coming in clean wouldn't know.
Yeah, and I think I also at this point I started to define a bunch of issues and backlog items that I actually wanted
Mhm.
to work on inside of it so I could track it or I could assign it to Copilot inside of github.com. And I've actually done that about I don't know 50 times at this point across the different ones. So this was like really fun. When I was getting started, this was pure vibes. Because at this point I was writing the backend, which I'm super familiar with Azure Functions, but I am not really familiar with Blazor. I'm not a web developer. I can write it.
Mhm.
I'm actually relatively, it's not that far from XAML. So like the component model's not that bad. Different binding mechanism, obviously,
Yep.
but I understand it. I know the code. I can read it. CSS, not that good
Oh,
at.
come on. Come on. Come on.
I could use
It's
the
worth
bootstrap.
learning CSS. Okay.
Never, no, never. Now, I think that was actually the biggest. That was actually the biggest hurdle, was that I wanted to never learn CSS and it's
Oh,
all of
come
its
on.
complexity. I no longer have to ever. That is for sure. You know,
Just cutting to the chase here, James created a great app here. It's a great SaaS. Everyone go give him all your money. But
no,
my God, there's so many CSS animations happening in the
yes.
background. And so it's very obvious that James just let the AI do whatever the heck it wanted for the CSS.
I do believe that my custom instruction says please add subtle animations to everything where appropriate.
Everything.
Now, I believe when it says where appropriate, it took some liberty at that. I did when iOS 16 was announced. I said, "Hey, Claude, like they just announced this thing. Here's a link to this. Like, go here's some photos of it. Can you go implement Glass for my
Yeah.
header navigation?" And it did a pretty decent job. It looks pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
did. Let me interrupt again. So you said you started getting into instructions early on, and this is a religion I'm trying to get into because I'm terrible at instructions. I'm just like typing in paragraphs to the chat
yeah.
AI UI all the time. But you're a Microsoft employee. You know that instructions are useful and all that kind of stuff. Just if you could possibly remember, which instructions do you feel like made the most impact on your code? Like, which ones did you feel like were very important for you to get in there? Is that too hard of a question to answer?
No, I mean, so there's two things. There's like the prompt instructions, and then there's actually like the instructions that just get sent with every single command. Those are the ones that are way
Those
more important.
ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think for me, some of the most important things that I have, like, because I use a lot of MCP servers for like connecting to GitHub. So I tell it like the primary branch I work on, where it lives. But most importantly, I kind of tell it like a lot of commanding. Like one thing I really found very useful is I told it how to build things, like what commands to run. And actually in VS Code
Mm.
Insider now, you can give it an allow and deny list. So you can just say .NET build, always allow it to without having to hit continue. So just do it. So I give it a lot of things there. But I think the most important part of it is honestly like the tech stack and then outlining the core projects, right? So, and I could probably even do a better job, but it's like, hey, listen, like the backend function, the backend APIs are in this thing. Like, so when you're analyzing code and I ask you to do a backend API, do this, right? And then I think a lot of it is like that I break down. I think a lot of the web UI, what I've learned a lot of is make sure that you tell it the things that you wanted to every time. So, for example, in my Blazor, I say, always use component specific CSS. So razor.css. When you create a new component, make sure you create that thing. Also, I say ignore warnings in Blazor components because in VS Code they're false positives. But like, I also tell it to use and implement light and dark theme every single time and never use hard coded values. Never. Don't ever do it. Put it in the main CSS. So there's that type of stuff. And then there's little things is when I see that it did something cool, I will say, go update it. So I was working a lot with CS. I had it refactor all the CSS. And I said, hey, everything you just learned, go update the Copilot instructions with a set of CSS best practices.
Oh,
And it did. So it has stuff about card design, responsive design, best practices in there, you know? So I tell it
pro
to do the
tip.
thing.
Pro tip, I often forget that the instructions themselves are a part of the workspace, and you can
Yeah.
ask it to go update those.
Go
So
update
thank
it.
you.
It's
Yeah.
right there. Yeah, in VS
Yep.
Code Insider, there's a button actually called like regenerate, and it'll like analyze your source code and do stuff.
Yeah.
So like
Okay.
little things like use try catch blocks in every event handler, like, log errors appropriately, like display user friendly error message. Like it's the little things that like we inherently do when we're writing code. And then be accessible, use ARIA attributes, ensure keyboard navigation works, use semantic HTML. And a lot of this ended up being that I was having it do something. I would run the app and then it wasn't quite right. So I said, hey, go do this thing. Okay, now let me go update the custom instructions, Copilot instructions, Copilot, like go,
Yeah.
right? And go do this. Now there's actually quite a lot in here. I'd probably break this down into a smaller
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, but it's actually not that big. It's like 300 lines. So like that's really not that much. It's grabbing
Hmm.
hundreds of lines of code at a time. You know what I mean? So actually it's pretty small. But now they have a way of specifying like um file types, so like only apply this to C# files, or only applies this to apply this to Razor files or
Interesting.
whatever. So but I had this one like document public APIs. That's cool, right? Like keep the documentation up to date. So it's things that I would do as a developer. What are the things that I want to do all the time? Like write unit tests. I have it write unit tests. I have 140 unit tests, Frank. I wrote unit
I
tests.
don't believe you.
No,
Not one.
like I have a performance section, right? Use virtualization.
Okay, sorry. This is nuts and bolts, but like, how often does it actually execute those commands? Because I know that
Every time.
every time. Okay. All
Every
right.
call to the agent sends the
Wow.
custom instructions with it.
Oh, there's that. But how often is it running your unit tests? Every chat prompt, or do you have
Uh
to ask it to?
so I would say that it depends on the model. Claude
Yeah.
likes to run all the tests
Sure.
all the time. However, you could in your custom instructions say always run the tests when you're done implementing
Yeah.
code, right?
Yeah.
I would
Fair
say
enough.
about like 50-50, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I'm lucky. You showed this to me when it was in a much earlier version.
Yes.
Um, I think you got to a proof of concept pretty fast, if memory serves. Like what, maybe a day of work or a couple days of work? How do you feel like you got to a point you're like, maybe I could start charging people for this? Like, I understand you're going to have more features to implement, but
Yeah.
at what point are you like, oh, this is kind of useful?
So I vibe coded the entire thing. Heather, bless her soul. I told her I was in a vibe, and
I'm vibing
I
over here, yo.
I I was up vibing with Copilot till like 3-4 in the morning. I was having
Sweet.
so
Sorry.
much fun. Like
Work life balance, but sweet. Sorry.
it was so much fun. Now, of course, I can't code during the day. This is as a side project, right? I
Hmm.
can't code during the day. I can like kick off a prompt and let it do its thing. Um, but I got to a proof of concept where I had the Azure Function backend, the Blazor front end, but I didn't have any databases. I stored everything in the browser with IndexedDB and local storage. I had no authentication. It was a password that you could just enter. It was very simple, and it just did it. I got that done in 72 hours from start to
Right.
finish.
Right.
Weekdays, not
Right.
weekends, weekdays. And I gave it to David. And what I immediately saw was that David loved it. And him and I
Oh.
were talking at like 1 a.m. while as I was adding new features and vibing the next day and the next day, a few days, like a week into this, I was like working until like midnight or whatever. And David's up late. We would be like messaging each other on like Teams or on Twitter. And he's like this, and he's like sharing this, like, oh, I love this. I love it. And he would send it to me. It's like, oh, this is so weird. Like, what if I had this feature? What if that feature? And I was just adding all these, like the share feature and this feature and
Yeah.
that feature
Okay.
and things that I was like, oh, that's really smart. And I would assign it to the coding agent. It would just go and do it. Like, oh, what if you could do this? What if you could do this?
Yeah.
And what ended up happening is this little POC in the first week started getting passed around
Yeah.
to like
Good.
internally. Got
Yeah.
passed around. I had to create like a whole like Word doc, how to set up the features, like how to get in with the password. And like people started using it, and people started, we have a little like group chat where people like, here's this new
Word
feature,
of
here's that
mouth.
thing, word of mouth. And I think actually the big game changer was I added a share feature. This was a feature that I think Damien asked for. Was he said it'd be great to be able to share a URL with somebody. Like what I was
Yeah.
doing forever, I had a copy button. You could copy the markdown and then paste it into like a Word doc or whatever. He's like, it'd be great to just say share and then give me a URL. And sure enough, that was the game changer, because everyone's like, what is this app? What is this? And then they would click, how do I get access? Oh, there's a link to a thing, right? So
Yeah.
that was the moment where I was like, this was not the moment where I was like, I could sell this to people. This was the moment that this is useful to my job and to people at my company that I work at. There's
Yeah.
value here. And funnily enough, from that moment, I immediately tried to pawn it off on other teams that were funded to actually make things.
You're
I
like,
was
I'm
like,
just a PM, everyone. Raising
yeah,
my hands. I'm just a PM vibing here.
there's a bunch of internal tools for like internal data and data analysis and stuff like that. And I was like, what if I could just be like, you can have it? And then everyone's like, I don't want that. They're like, we have real jobs to do. I was like, okay, fine. So, but at this point, it ended up
That's
being
funny.
like, okay, this is something that one got me on Hansel minutes, which I never thought I'd be on, which is cool. Thanks, Scott. And it enabled me to use the tools in a new way that I never thought. I never thought I could build something like this
Yeah.
ever. And this isn't even like the most complex piece of software ever, but it's actually doing quite a lot and integrating in a lot of third-party things. And I just thought it was so neat, and I was off to the races. And I knew at this point that it'd been a week, so I knew that there was a lot of tech debt that I'd built up, but it was in a place that
Yeah.
anyone could use it. They could just keep using it as is, because it was using in storage, in browser storage. Like if you went from machine to machine or phone, like it's not going to sync anything or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, hey, you can use it and do the thing and it'll work. And that was like the POC moment that I was like, I have something. So I think that was kind of cool. And you see a lot of these startups, which is I can go from nothing to POC and user testing in a matter of
Yeah.
days. Just prototypes, pure
Well,
prototypes.
I mean, to be clear, the revolution is very simple. The idea used to be worth 10%. If you had an idea for a great app, it was worth 10%. Because someone else had to do the 90%. They had to do the coding, all the ridiculousness of making your app a reality.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a good idea, I mean, the idea is worth probably 60, 70% now, because the AI can do the other 20%, and then you need someone else doing 10% to clean up the mess the AI makes and all that kind of stuff. But it's great that you got that word of mouth. And that's always a test of a good application. If you don't have to do any marketing and people just start coming to you, then you're like, oh, this is kind of a good idea.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't have to do any promotion and they're just asking me for new features, that's pretty great. And you were just going there. Now, the problem is, James, as you know, all of a sudden you're going to get 8 billion requests for 8 billion features. And
Yeah.
you're just like, yo, I'm just making a tech demo to demonstrate vibe coding here.
Yeah.
um, at what point did you decide, like, I'm going to spend a little more time on this? I'm not going to talk to my wife anymore. Instead, I'm just going to vibe code. I'm not going to hang out anymore. Um, Making it real, as you say so perfectly in your notes, is probably the hardest part of any app. I love writing tech demos. I love doing a proof of concept, like, oh yeah, this is what I could do. All
Yeah.
I need to do is devote 2,000 more hours to this and never talk to my friends ever again, and I would totally finish it. Um, I don't want to say that's what you did, because you're leveraging AI. You're able to really amplify your skills with AI. But at the same point, it still requires some devotion. At some point, you do have to put on your PM hat again and decide
Mhm.
which of those 8 million features you're actually going to implement. Um, how do you go from this is a fun little experiment I'm running to maybe I'll actually make this a thing?
So there's a few things. I've been working on this app for. Let me look at the original commit in the code base here. It's probably a
5
value.
weeks, 4 weeks. Or
Uh,
I'm guessing.
no,
No?
I started. I'm gonna go way back in time. I
Way
started
back.
working.
GitHub does not make that easy, sadly. They need a
It
button
does
like, "Take
not.
me to the beginning, babe."
So I started my initial in April. So April
Oh, it's been a
14th,
while. Okay, a few
May,
months.
June, July, almost 3 months. And that's when
Yeah.
I started the original refactoring. It was about 3 months ago. So the first thing I did was I actually started doing those feature requests. So
Mhm.
I actually thought the original functionality as is a beautiful little tiny little prototype that wowed Hanselman. So that was cool. But
That's
then I
all that's
said,
important, everyone. Just if you can impress Scott, it's a good product.
it's a good
That's all you
product.
need. He's got
Yeah.
great taste.
I started taking the feedback from folks and I said, okay, like what actually would add value here to not just them, but like to my job. Like I actually think I built this tool originally, and I always like to say the best apps that are created are ones you create for yourself. So like there was a need, which was like we were doing tons of posts and analysis, and I, want to save time and I want to use AI, I want to do stuff. And so I implemented one key feature that I think was really the game changer that really blew people's minds, which was the reporting. And this is something that's always been a problem, which is I want to monitor a Reddit, a subreddit. I want to monitor a GitHub repo. I want
Okay.
to monitor my YouTube channel, right? Not just a piece of content, but all of the content, the activity in the community. Now, there's plenty of tools that use this, and I've used quite a few of them and that ingest all this data. But if I'm like if there was an iCircuit, subreddit, it would be
Mhm.
pretty cool that you could get an analysis report like of everything happening. So I implemented this feature that was which I think has a lot of potential to grow from here, especially like analysis of things over time or multiple things. But the reporting feature was what if I could the actual usage was what if I could get things into my inbox? So that, that was the fun
Okay.
out of my tool into my inbox. At Microsoft, we love email, but I thought, how cool would it be is if at any time I could generate a report for like the VS Code subreddit, the .NET subreddit, and for the last week, 30 days, I could generate a unique report that is emailed in my inbox that's beautiful, that gives me all the top threads, top comments, top discussions that's going on. It's all
Yeah.
public data, right? So
Yeah.
I vibe coded that next. And that was a feature that I think was pretty game changer. And I started to set up distribution groups and sending people these emails that were generated by the back end, right? The code's already in there to get all the stuff. Go do it. And then I said, what if I put those in the app so I could subscribe to my own
Yeah.
reports, right? And this is where things got a little complicated without user accounts, right? Because I was just showing everything that I was generating, but people were like, well, I want to monitor my own thing. So that is like the user feedback where I was like, oh, okay. This is the feature that clicked. It was not just I want to analyze this thing, get a report. It was I want to track my own data sources. I want things that are
Yeah.
unique to me. I want the Frank Krueger version of this. I want my own saved reports. I want my own,
Yeah.
saved analysis. I want to come back and get this thing. I want it in my inbox, right? And I said, okay, this is the real thing that is going to I'll POC it. So I did POC it with all the local cache and stuff like this. But I said, this is the moment where I said, yeah, I could, if I want to, I can make this real. And I would say I POC'd it where everything was still in the browser and it worked. And I let it linger for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. We went on holiday to
It's
Spain
a
for
good
a
idea.
conference. I let it linger. I just said,
Uh,
okay,
just to interject, pro tip to anyone developing any app, let it linger. Like you're gonna get passionate about it. Like work on it, work hard on it, but you gotta take a step back for 2 or 3 weeks and just let it settle out so you can think about it, let other people think about it. So
well,
I just want to interject to say, let it
yeah.
linger. That's a great
Well,
phrase.
I let it linger. Well, and then the other thing I did is when I came back, I asked David, I said, well, are you still using this? He goes, I use it every day. And I said, oh, cool.
Right. That's the
If he
feedback
can,
you want here.
yeah, that was one of the big things in general. So the problem with making it real is a few things. One, there was password authentication in the beginning.
Oh
So just
gosh, yeah,
one password. So nothing else, no user accounts, no real databases, no feature usage analysis, anything. It was,
yeah,
I have a robots.txt, right? So it's like hidden from,
yeah,
everything. I'm like, I want to deploy this, but I only want people at,
yeah.
Microsoft to use it for prototyping.
Direct
Now
links only. Yeah.
I did buy a domain name, so it does exist on the internet now. Um, Instead of a long Azure websites.net URL or whatever. So that also made it like realer. And like when I told Fowler about a domain, he's like, "Oh crap, like it's happening." But this meant a few things. It meant that there was refactoring to be done. Obviously, there's a
Yeah,
lot of tech debt because I wanted
yeah.
it. I wanted to build it this way, right? I wanted to get something out quick. I wanted to prototype. I wanted to get it to the
Good.
people.
Yep.
But then the other thing was like, I don't want to throw that code away, or I have all this code. I want to add authentication. I want to add feature usage. I want to add real time reporting. I want to reset usage. I want to have real databases. I want to have upsells, and
You
I need all of
sorry.
it. Yeah.
You did it the right way. So many people start with user accounts and upsells and all the authentication stuff before they have a product,
Yeah.
before they've proven that the thing is actually useful. So I applaud you for going in. I'll just call it the Frank direction, honestly. Like build the app first, then worry about the user accounts and everything. I watch way too many YouTube videos where they just spend their first 2 days just working on a super base, some stupid authentication system. Like,
Yeah.
you literally don't have one user and you're building an authentication system. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, use IndexedDB at the browser level. Like, it's fine.
It's fine.
You can make your Ajax calls later. It's no big deal. Auth is trivial to implement. It's annoying to implement, but for an AI, man, they can spit out auth code all day long. You don't have to worry about it. Like,
Yeah.
that's literally 1 day of work to add user accounts and authentication. Refactoring, it can be a pain in the butt and all that. I get it, but don't start there. Work on the product, work on the features first. So I actually really appreciate that that's the direction you went.
Yeah. I worked originally. Well, I wrote a big, I did some deep analysis. This is where I actually did a lot. We talked on the last few podcasts ago of deep analysis, which was now I knew what I needed to do. Now I had a code base, and I worked a lot with a lot of thinking models and analysis models with Copilot to analyze my code base, understand documentation, understand how authentication works in Blazor and functions and its backend and easy auth and what I would need to do. So I wrote like a very small spec of here's what I want to create, like the feature spec, as like a paragraph of like what I want to do in this. I'd expand this based on the code base of all the things that I need to do in it, and do some deep research and understand this and call, documentation and all these things, and search the internet. I didn't use Perplexity, but I gave it the URLs of different things that it could do. There's a MCP server for Microsoft Learn documentation that's very nifty. So I did some deep research, and I first did an analysis of like what auth provider should I use. So I said so the first thing I said is go figure out auth providers for .net and like what should I use. So it did a breakdown of like Azure AD, and it did like Okta, and it did like this, and I said okay, cool. So I used easy auth, but I wrote this huge
Okay.
spec for this implementation. I said here's all the things that I want to do, but I had this issue, and then I refined it. I said okay, what do I actually want it to do? So I didn't maybe refine it enough. It did a good job of implementing it, but I started just to say, could the AI just write all of it? Like not even like in VS Code, just on github.com, assign it to the coding agent,
Yeah.
just do it. How far can it get? And it did pretty flippin' good, I would say. I would say the hardest part of OAuth with like using easy auth is like different auth providers return different JSON properties for the different things. So you got to do a bunch of parsing. But I learned a lot about auth in general. I'm still figuring out there's a few refresh token things that I need to implement.
Sure.
But in
Always.
general, like it did it, and the hardest part ended up being I didn't actually think about feature usage. So this is one of my problems is I added auth. I was like, I just need auth, right? And then I was like, and
Quotas.
I need this. And then I was like, oh crap. And then John Galloway, he's like, oh, I did this thing. And he's like, so now anyone can log in, right? And I was like, oh
Oh
crap.
boy. Oh
I was
boy.
like, uh oh, right?
Well,
So
Yeah, I mean, that's the trick. Okay, so I said any AI worth its salt can implement auth, but you decided to go SaaS, software as a service, which I didn't understand in the beginning, but really just means you're charging for your software as a service. That's what it's
Yeah.
really. That's what SaaS actually is. It's a payment portal and all that.
Yeah.
Auth is trivial. Breaking down an app into service tiers and quotas and all of that. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty of actually building an app and making a business and all that kind of
Tracking
stuff.
those, logging it, auditing,
Yeah,
databases, resetting
exactly.
the things. When do you do it? If
Mhm.
you sign up, is it 30 days from now or is it at the first of
Uh-huh.
the month, right? Like
Oh,
when do
yeah.
you do? How do you
Billing
display the
cycles,
quotas?
chargebacks from the credit card,
Does your does your does your front end call a back end to say, can I do this thing? Or does it try to do the thing and then the thing throws an
Right.
exception? Like, where's the flow of it? Right. And this was like
Yeah.
really, really the complicated. This is the deep thinking in my mind of how it was going to work and how we'd implement these things in general. Now, I will say I am and I have pro and I have free, pro, and pro plus because I just followed the models that I like out there. I actually I had it come up with I said, hey, here's my current usage from the last week. Come up with what you'd
Yeah.
recommend basically for these
Okay.
things. And these three areas. So I have analysis, which is an active analysis using like here's any data given analysis, a report, so tracking a report, and then queries, feed queries. So like if you're like getting something from Twitter or from YouTube or whatever, that's a feed query. I'm not sure if those are the right names or not, but I track those things, and I have very beautifully like animated little tiny little things that it created, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Um, um, but yeah, it's a real thing, and I even like collect email addresses. I think at this point I am 98% live. It's in staging still, but so it's not
Mhm.
actually in prod. I'm not taking money yet. Um, I need Stripe integration to do that. But it's
Yeah.
there, and you can click the button, and it says this will be implemented soon. But I have all the tiers. So when you sign up, you're on the free tier, and I have a super user account of these different ones. All that upgrade is available.
Yeah.
The thing that, you know, I've done here is I've written less than 100 lines of code, and this is a extremely functional app. So much that you, Frank, I gave you a URL, and you used it.
Yeah.
I learned some things that I can improve on my end, but you used
It's
it and it
always.
happened and it worked, which was cool.
Yeah.
And then you're like, how do I give you money for this? And I was like, well, you can't just yet, but it's here. But the thing that it can't do is the legal part. Like, I don't know about terms, privacy, GDPR, all this stuff, cookies.
Yeah.
That's my one issue. Like, I would say everything that I've done up until this point is like ready for prime time, but all that legality
Yeah.
stuff and account deletion and all this other stuff, I have no idea. That's my like big fear zone in general,
Yeah.
to actually launching a SaaS and taking money from people. Like my what will probably happen is I will launch this and then David will be like, I signed up for an account. I was like, cool, I made you a super user. You have unlimited requests. And like that, and then I'll just go into the database and make people like pro users, right? And like
Yeah. Yeah.
in general. So, but I don't know. That's kind of like where
Uh,
I'm at right now today with it. But yeah, it did all the things and has light and dark mode. That's actually the most complicated part. Is light and dark
Keep
mode.
stressing that. Keep stressing
Yes.
it. No, I mean that's always the hardest part of the web. You and I are mobile developers. The beauty of mobile development is we tend to sell through stores, and so Apple and Microsoft and Google they take care of all the BS, business services, we'll call it,
Yeah.
but basically all that legal stuff that you have to deal with. Um, it's just it comes with the territory, and I'll say you're already 10 steps ahead of every other SaaS service out there because my goodness, most SaaS people, at least the modern ones, just don't care.
Yeah.
They're not legal. They're not abiding by every European Union law. They're not abiding by everything. So it's when you make a mistake, you correct for it. It's as simple as that. I would say the general rules are very simple. If a user wants their data, you give them an easy download button. If they want to cancel their account, you make it easy to cancel their account. If
Yeah.
they don't want to use cookies, you just say, I require one session cookie and that's it. You
Yeah.
know, it does feel overwhelming at first, but I feel like after you've built a few services, you get to know the law. It's really not that complicated. You put your age restrictions on you there. You say this is not for children. You know, all the things, even the app stores that you and I are familiar with have gotten more and more complicated in those terms. You have
Yeah.
privacy policies, you have age restrictions. You say this is the policy in this country and that country, whatever. Brazil is more complicated than the United States, whatever. You learn those differences pretty gosh darn quickly. And so I would say you're already 2 steps ahead. I said 10 earlier. You're 2 steps ahead of everyone just by thinking that you have those problems, because I'll tell you what, the majority of YouTube videos out there building SaaS systems that make you 50K in the first week don't give one iota
Yeah.
of thought to any of that stuff. So you're already doing fine. I am curious. Will you charge for this thing? Will this actually become a proper product?
I think so. I think and to your point, the nice thing is I'm not using any crazy like cookie tracking stuff. Like the only cookie is your
Mhm.
auth cookie. That's the only cookie I
Yeah.
have, and I
Your
don't even
session
add that.
cookie. Yeah.
That's my session cookie, which is
Yeah.
required. I do have and it implemented the delete functionality, the danger zone, which I love that I called
Yeah.
it. Um,
Have a way to download the data. I think that's a
hmm,
European thing too.
download
Anything
data.
that's yeah,
That's easy.
yeah, easy peasy. Just dump a giant JSON file like everyone else does.
Yeah,
Here's your zip file of everything I got. Good luck,
that's
buddy.
true. Uh, I think that the so I would say this. Why would I possibly charge money for this? Well, I run this on my personal Azure subscription, so it is going to cost me money if I'll have to change subscriptions to my not MSDN account. Um, but the one thing I would say about it is with this application that will cost me money to run, it would only make sense to charge money for it, right? It's not like a mobile app I
Absolutely.
can just put in the store where I don't have
Yeah.
any backend and can do stuff. The thing with it is um, that the only way that I can make this app right, so having user accounts, storing data, making the share, making the reports, sending auto emails. Like I have a plan of just saying like subscribe to this report and it'll send you an
Mhm.
email every week. That's going to cost me money, and also it it needs to have these user accounts, right? So the only way to actually only save myself from potential abuse, because if I didn't put these guards in place, you could analyze hundreds of things over and over and over and over again, right? Because there would be no
Yeah.
safeguards.
Absolutely. Yep.
But because we're doing it this way, now there's safeguards in place. So I don't rack up a bajillion-dollar bill for it, right? I don't know if
Yeah.
these prices are correct. I don't know if any of these things are here. I know
Right.
how much it costs to run every month. Already it's like, I don't know, $60. But like in general, that's with, 40 users. You know what I mean? Who knows if I get 100 users, 200 users. So it's not that I'm actually trying to make money off of this. It's mostly actually the analysis and like
Oh, yeah.
validation rule, so I don't run up a crazy, Azure bill from this. So that's the only reason I'm putting that in place, for it to actually be a true SaaS. Like I don't want to make money off it.
Mhm.
I don't need to, right?
But
But I need to if I want to make something that's actually useful, that I want anyone to be publicly accessible on the internet, just so people can do it and at work,
yeah.
there needs to be those guard and rules. So what's the only guard that you can put? Charge money
Yeah.
for stuff, right? That's the goal.
And honestly, it makes 100% sense because mm, your app is AI driven. You're not just using AI to write it, it
Yeah.
uses AI itself. And that costs money. And I think everyone understands that. And so that's a perfect thing that you should charge for. Finding the price point, as you said, is difficult, and you'll probably
Yeah.
make mistakes, and you'll probably have a month where you're under the water, but you'll figure out the correct proportion to make, and then you can start actually making a little profit or breaking even, whatever you want to do in that
Yeah.
regard. Versus all the apps that start with a SaaS model that actually don't cost anything. Like
Yeah.
servers cost money, sure, but they're essentially free. If you're a half decent programmer, you can get a cheap server that can service thousands and thousands of users with minimal cost. But in your case, if I request 3,000 videos and analytics on 3,000 videos, that's going to cost you, James, a lot of money. And so you better come up with a pricing model. But I think that's also kind of standard. When you have back end costs, that's just running a proper business.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is we came into this with you wanting to brag that you only had to write 100 lines of code,
Hmm.
which is great because I think you only did write 100 lines of code. I 100% believe you on that. But the parts that you're actually most afraid of is the business side. Like AI has not solved the business side yet. Exactly. So you can build the app of your dreams, but you still have to be careful with how that app functions and how to actually make money from it. Running a business is not a trivial matter because it's real money. Your name is attached to it. You have a credit card on Azure. It's going to cost you real dollar bills. So you still have to take all the precautions a proper business person would take. So it's fantastic that AI has enabled you to create a new product, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you still have all this. These are business concerns from the 16th century, buddy. Like, and this is what everyone's been dealing with forever
Yeah.
since they started a business. Ever since you had to start buying iron in order to make ships that sail the seas, these are the same problems everyone's had.
It's true. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I mean, it's super crazy impressive. And I've built other things too. Like I have that bingo app and a few other things that I vibe coded, which are like super fun that they're applications on the internet that just do things. They don't need to worry about there's no cookies, there's no user accounts. It's just here's fun stuff like just how I'd build mobile apps.
Yeah.
And to think that it's been cool to build something super real. I mean, this is actually, I mean, it's funny to say it and people may not believe this, but this is actually like the first app that I've built in my life that I've shipped. Like there's a link that people can go to and like use, and it'll be in prod soon, that uses user accounts and authentication. Like
Oh,
I work
interesting. Yeah.
like real social auth, right? Like a real
Mm-hmm.
thing. Like we've had like when I worked at Canon and stuff, like I had user accounts like that were in the database. I didn't build that. It was already there. It was already infrastructure, like with their SQL servers and their accounts, but it was like servers, like for reprographer printers. It wasn't for like, online, the internet, stuff like that. But everything else I've ever built is that, remember, for the Animal Crossing app, there were accounts, but they were GUIDs based on your device.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not,
God, I love our discussions around that.
yeah,
Go back
like,
to episode 200 or whatever that was.
yeah, and you could like transfer your account with a QR code. It was stupid, but it was like amazing, right? So in this case, like this is, yeah, and that one I didn't even charge, but it was like this is real things, right? This is real things that are really happening. So
Yeah.
I think it's like really amazing. Like it's astonishing, and like the fact is, like I built all of this, and it was like super fun to do. Learned a lot, used awesome tools, used so many models, and used more AI that I could possibly think of. But it also has me just thinking of how I analyze other things, like analyzing error codes, analyzing exceptions, analyzing data. Like one of the things I really worked with was like, giving it context, like, hey, here's what the data looks like, right? Like, just don't have it go find the API and some documentation. Like, here's the JSON that's coming from it, right? Like, go figure out the most optimized way of, because like I could have been like, hey, here's what I need to do. I need to right click and then copy as JSON class. But I was like, figure out what I actually need in my app and only expose those things, but like store this data in a file. So I think it was like really awesome in that sense. And I hope to come back by the end of the year, in the next few months, and be like, yeah, this is now actually a real SaaS that has happened. We can see
Yeah.
what happens when what other lessons have I learned. The most fun that I have on this podcast is when we ship things, and it's been a long time since I shipped anything. Um, it has. You think about it, right? The last thing I really
Huh?
shipped was the ski app, and that was like 3 years ago. So
All right. Well, on that note, I think it's a grand success. We'll all be waiting with bated breath to give you our dollar bills so we can know whether the internet likes us or not.
there you go. Well, I appreciate you, Frank. So that's going to do it for this week's Merge Conflict. So until next time, I'm James Montemagno.
And I'm Frank Kruger. Thanks for watching and listening.
Peace.